Before we dive into despair, this video is sponsored by Raycon. Look, let's cut to the chase. Christmas shopping can be very stressful, especially when you're not entirely sure what the perfect gift is. So let's take away that stress by introducing you and your loved ones to the everlasting power of Raycon. As you probably know, Raycon have made a name for themselves in premium audio at affordable prices, particularly with these bad boys, their everyday earbuds, which I use on a daily basis, from energizing myself listening to Electric Six during the cold winter days, to relaxing on the couch enjoying a good toasty horror flick. Everyday earbuds are my personal recommendation because they're designed to suit everyone's activities, from noise isolation and awareness mode for safe commutes and traveling, to having a built-in speaker for work calls or chatting with friends, to 3 custom sound profiles to give you the best performance possible. Additionally, Raycon has expanded into home and power tech, which includes their fast-charging all-in-one Magic 180 charging cable, faucet filter for tap water impurities, and even air purifiers, so if you're not an audio person, there's still something for everyone to make your life better. Raycon offer easy free returns, free shipping, and buy now pay later options to make your shopping life easier. And right now they're offering limited time bundles on some of their best selling products, including fitness kits, an everyday audio kit, and everyday earbud 3-pack kit, which I particularly recommend because you're essentially buying 3 gifts in one. So this holiday season, get premium audio and power tech at a great price and save even more doing it. Simply go to buyraycon.com/Ryan to get 15% off site-wide, and in turn you'll be giving me the gift of supporting my channel. So, what do you think is the best horror film of 2023? Because as the year draws to a close, it's only obligatory that I give you my answer, but as I said in my Talk To Me video, I wasn't entirely in love with this year as a whole. I thought it was fairly okay at best, outside one very simple yet remarkably provocative Argentinian flick. So, let's see what the crack is. When Evil Lurks tells the story of 2 brothers, Pedro, who looks like me after 3 weeks without shaving, and Jaime, who looks like me when I shave and wonder if I can still pull off a mustache. They live in a world resigned to the existence of evil and demonic possession, treating it as though it's a disease in need of contamination to prevent it from spreading. This proves to be the case when they awaken to mysterious gunshots that lead them to a severed body along with a strange broken contraption. Notably, the remains are not of an animal attack, but rather appear to be butchered, and upon learning the victim's intention to meet with their neighbor Maria, they confront her about their ghoulish discovery, to which she reluctantly reveals her eldest son Uriel has become a rotten, a possessed host whose body has literally begun to rot while impregnated by a demon. Without needing to explain itself, we learn through organic world building that while uncommon, anyone cursed as a rotten must be cleansed, or rather euthanized urgently by a specialist known as a cleaner to prevent the possession from infecting those who live on tainted soil. What follows is an incredibly dire journey as the brothers attempt to escape the demonic pestilence that threatens them and their family, hoping that by removing themselves far from the land in which evil lurks, they may finally find safety and solitude to live out the remainder of their eroding lives. Now, you can already tell it leans heavily on the disease allegory, as if to suggest it's a play on the fear and hysteria of COVID, and while that's an incredibly valid interpretation as it literally deals with 2 brothers indirectly spreading the virus to their families instead of isolating, writer-director Damien Rugna provides a more, unusual explanation. In an interview with Polygon, Rugna explained that the film was born out of stories about the harmful effects of pesticide in the Argentinian farming community, where, in his words, in their efforts to preserve and maintain their land from bugs and rodents eating at their crops, they resorted to desperate measures as they struggled to endure their abandonment by the system. In other words, due to a lack of socio-economic support from the government, who reserved it to thriving towns and cities hell-bent on capitalism, rural villagers continue to dwell in a vicious cycle of poverty and poor resources that ultimately spread health defects into new generations, such as more kids being born with cancer as a result of pesticide chemicals and so on. I don't know the specifics of Argentinian culture, obviously. I'm sure someone can educate me on that in the comments below, but I can see where Rugna is coming from by using a hybrid of plague and possession as an allegory for the worsening devastation that poverty and marginalization causes. It doesn't make a significant song and dance about it outside the clear discrepancy between the brothers, their families, and the system that refuses to help them. At first they go to the police, who don't see it as their problem, before turning their attention to the landowner Ruiz, who initially suspects it's all a ruse by the state to take his land. There's an interesting theme throughout of how we take pride in secrecy for what little we truly possess and how far we'll go to protect it. In the case of Ruiz, he forces the rotten Uriel off his land without any compassion or dignity for the victim or his family because property and ownership are conditioned to take precedence over people, and in the later case of Pedro, he goes out of his way to protect his kids, despite them already being far from harm's way, inadvertently putting them in the center of it. We'll discuss Pedro's journey very soon, but for now, if you want a general vibe for what When Evil Lurks is going for, look no further than any Cormac McCarthy novel, specifically Blood Meridian. You've likely heard all the hype about the film's grotesque violence, and while yes, it takes no prisoners, particularly children, yeah, you see a dog utterly brutalize a little girl, it's largely restrained in how it approaches its subject matter. With mild comparisons to Blood Meridian, it's purely in how it feels like a borderline post-apocalyptic western, with its desolate, disheveled rural setting and seemingly nihilistic characters, whose sympathy is buried deep beneath their conflicting demeanors. You don't need backstory or exposition to understand why they are the way that they are, particularly Pedro, whose volatile emotional instability makes him prone to mistakes and very, very poor decision making. It's a society decaying on the grounds of evil, with the poor, innocent souls who remain turning to distrust, paranoia, and even violence, acting selfishly to protect whatever they have left before it withers away before them. Before Pedro and Jaime leave town following the dumping of Uriel, Ruiz is confronted by a cameo from Black Phillip's distant cousin, whose possessed demon goat presence taunts Ruiz into shooting it, an act that's revealed to only further spread the possession rather than resolve it, with the possession then spreading to his wife, who executes Ruiz with an axe before gruelingly turning it on herself. Warmed up, settled in, good. Brace yourself because this shit only gets worse. The real meat of the story comes from when Pedro goes to collect his children by forcing his way into his ex-wife Sabrina's house, changing out of his rotten infected clothing, and essentially antagonizing her family and husband under the guise that evil is coming, when in fact evil is already here. I'm not just talking about his infected clothing, which the good boy licks and becomes possessed, I'm actually talking about Pedro himself. Sabrina reveals she has a restraining order placed against him, which we can interpret further as a result of his impatient, aggressive, domineering, and abusive demeanor, which he's warned about on several occasions as he constantly tries to interfere with matters outside his control, which all began when he first heard the gunshots. Pedro is basically framed as a fool who cannot see through his own hubris. In fact, both brothers are called naive and stupid for the lack of thought put into their actions, which makes for an interesting subversion to horror protagonists who all seem to conveniently adapt to situations when the plot requires them to. In this film, they never do. They're still as clueless and panic-stricken as they began, and never truly come to comprehend their actions until it's far too late, with Jaime even ideating on the intention to shoot himself and potentially others, to save them the mercy of demonic possession. As I say this, Pedro's ex-wife's new husband's daughter is suddenly attacked by the possessed good boy and dragged down the street, only for Pedro to selfishly concede that there's no hope and giving up on the chase to get his own children, his property so to speak, one of which is autistic. They drive away, but not before the possession spreads to the stepfather, who crashes his car into Sabrina, killing her, mirroring the deaths of Ruiz and his wife. Now, before we go any further, we have to address this. Things get a bit troublesome here, but it's later explained that, well, how do I put this delicately? When a demon possesses someone autistic, in the words of the film, don't shoot the messenger, the demon becomes lost in limbo because it can't work out the host's mind. As such, it becomes blatantly obvious when Pedro's son later becomes possessed because he starts showing independent cognitive abilities that he previously didn't have. Anyway, once Pedro gets his kids and Jimena gets he and Pedro's mother, they take refuge at the home of Jimena's friend Mirta, who reveals some interesting details that further cement the cruel, evil world around them. As briefly mentioned earlier, Mirta is formerly what's known as a cleaner, a specialist demon hunter of sorts who provides the sole means to appropriately execute and banish those possessed or rotten without the evil returning. As I also said, killing those possessed by any means outside this special device only exacerbates the spread, thus the body the brothers discovered in the opening was that of another cleaner sent to cleanse Uriel. However, Mirta reveals that increasing reports of rotten are because cleaners essentially went into hiding after they started getting snuffed out by demons, thus evil and corruption have only continued to prevail without resistance. It further ties into the allegorical curse of poverty perpetuated by power by showing that the demons are motivated to take possession and property of those they, well, possess, even if the host is actually dead. As such, since Pedro took his ex-wife's children because, bear in mind, with a restraining order, technically he's kidnapped them, the now possessed Sabrina comes hunting for them, eventually taking Pedro's youngest son while the autistic one becomes possessed. At this point, it relies on some typical tropes to separate the characters, as Marta comes out of retirement and tells Jimena to go save Pedro's son, as the demon can sense Pedro's fear and thus tell if he's coming, leaving Pedro and Marta to hunt down Uriel's body to end the spread of the disease once and for all. We end up in some Devil's Backbone meets the Wheeling territory when their search leads them to a local school guarded by demon children who protect Uriel under a pile of adult corpses as they await the birth of the demon child. Yeah, remember that bit? This dude is supposed to give birth to the spawn of Satan or something like that, so it's within his own interest to be executed when he both taunts and begs Pedro to kill him then and there, while Marta tells Pedro to keep his patience. During this, we see Jimena cruise up on Sabrina, casually munching away on Pedro's son's brains like me eating a bag of chips on a drunken walk home, to which he understandably mows her down with his car, because eating a child is usually frowned upon in some places. If you want to intellectualize it, there's probably something in here about gluttony and devouring your possessions, but I'm just going to perceive that she was a bit peckish from being dead and the whole journey to get there. By the way, this is the second time in one day she's been battered by a fucking car. Back at the school, we see Pedro battle the manipulation of the innocents who feed on his impulse and anger, soon successfully convincing him to embrace his inability to listen and do what he's told, and abandoning Marta to get an axe. Having been tricked by his weakness of impatience, Marta is then brutally battered by the children who shatter the ritual, leaving an exhausted and frustrated Pedro to retaliate by also brutally battering Uriel, and thus our demon baby is born. That's right, there's no grand exorcism or day to be saved, as the vicious cycle dooms Pedro to be stuck in his old tired ways, allowing evil, power and corruption to flourish, leaving him to live with the devastation he ultimately had no control over. He returns home to where it all began, having lost his family, including his autistic son, who devoured Pedro and Jimena's mother while they were gone. Jimena learns all of this was doomed from the very start, as Uriel's younger brother was already possessed to kill the cleaner the brothers discovered near their farm, thus evil was always destined to prevail. The final shot sees Pedro breaking down in agony, forever living in torment and perpetual purgatory in a world that's no longer theirs, or really was never theirs to begin with. Yeah, so that's when evil lurks. Not exactly the fucking happiest of outcomes, but nonetheless, it's a very refreshing possession movie that I highly recommend. Refreshing in the sense that it's like rolling in pig shit with an open wound, but nonetheless, if you have a request, please leave it in the comments below. Leave your thoughts on the movie as well, and until next time, stay safe, stay away from rotten pregnant people, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.